Hello, this is a follow-on to the origin of the virgin surname and the origin of the Y chromosome. I have some new information that I want to share, and so I'm going to start with a picture of the surname virgin and where it was over the centuries here. I'm going to go back in time by moving this slider and show you how it shrinks. And you could see this green dot here is looking like where the origin is. So we'll just go back in time even more. And there you go. You can see that the origin of this surname is coming from England. It's no surprise, we've already kind of known that. All right, so now if we focus in on the English area and we go back to the 1700s, you can see here the distribution of the surname virgin, and you've got a large green dot here in Kent, and you've got another green dot over here in Somerset. If you look at the United States and you go back to the 1600s, you'll notice that there is a cluster of virgins here in Maryland, but also a second cluster up here in New England. So what's going on there? Well, in my research, I came across, through the DNA results, I came across this other family from New England, and ironically enough, they changed their name to Virgil around the Revolutionary War time, but they were originally virgins, starting with this guy, Richard Virgin, who showed up in New England and had 4 children. And then you can see down here, they changed their name around the Revolutionary War. This entire family of William and Martha changes their names to Virgil. And now you have a family of Virgils in New England, and they have a few buffs, genealogy buffs, in their midst, and they have banker boxes full of documents and family lore and everything else that's been passed down through hundreds of years. So they have a lot of information about their virgin ancestors. And one of the pieces of information that they have came to us through a letter that was written in 1922, I believe, describing where the original virgins came from England. And then in 1971, somebody, one of these genealogy buffs from this family, actually went to England and found this house and took some pictures of it. So this is the house in Somerset, and it is located in a place called Middle Chinook. And you could see, this is a great picture here on this gate. It actually says Virgins Living on that gate. And this is a church there, St. Margaret's, where there's some 1700s records of virgins there. So this was new information to me when I first heard it, but it doesn't completely surprise, because if you go back to this map of England and the incidence of virgins, you could see there is this nice cluster over here in Somerset of virgins, as well as this cluster over here in Kent. Okay, so what's going on and how are we related? Specifically, one of the questions we want to know is, how are these New England virgins related to our virgins down here, the Maryland virgins? And DNA gives us that answer. DNA tells us where our common ancestor is most likely, and that's here. And this would be a birth around 1500. And you can see this is Robert R. Immigrant. And Richard immigrated about 45 years after Robert. So there's Richard that went to New England and Robert who went to Jamestown. So a few generations back, we have a great-great-grandfather of Robert, and that would be the most likely common ancestor between Richard and Robert. So we've got a nice connection between that Richard family and this location here in Somerset. And what we're trying to do now is try and figure out exactly if there's a paper trail in England that can connect Richard and Robert through a common ancestor. And that will help us determine if, number one, did our ancestors also originate from Somerset? Were we wrong about Kent to begin with? And did we also come from Somerset? Because these two immigrants are related. We know that DNA, we have DNA cousins that connect these two families. So are we wrong about Kent? Or did they just move from Somerset to Kent at some point? These are all questions that are still unanswered that we need to get to the bottom of. But this was a really exciting new information to understand where this New England family of virgins is originating from, and from England. Okay, so the next bit of information that I want to share with you is got to do with the DNA results that came back from the big Y test that we did on my dad. So the results of the big Y test, it is a DNA test. It takes about 4 months to get the results in, and it traces from father to son to son to son to son to son, all the way back to the original Adam. So our haplogroup and our Y test takes us back to our Adam, which is here 200,000 years before Christ. So a really long time ago. And I'm going to play this animation, and we'll watch this father to son haplogroup move around the globe, and we'll see what it looks like. It's pretty interesting. Now, this gray cloudy stuff up here is ice. So during the ice age, you'll see this gray cloud actually grow and cover much of northern Europe. And so that's what is going on there. Also pay attention to the year as you watch this little man move. You'll be able to see the years tick by. The other thing is there'll be lines that will shoot off of this guy as he's moving. Those are sibling branches of this haplogroup. So basically a sibling of this guy would have taken off in a different direction and gone a different way. So that's what those are. So let's go ahead and watch it. Here's the ice age moving in. And the ice is receding. Okay, I'm going to stop right here. You'll notice that one of these sibling lines right here, we're at 1800 BC. So this is before Christ. One of our sibling lines has made it ahead of us over here to Britain. So just make a note of that. You'll also see a sibling line that will go north and over to Ireland once we get into Britain. We stay in this location for like 1,000 years. There's a sibling line that makes it to Ireland. Okay, so that's the end. This is our final haplogroup here, and that's where it ends. It ends about 1500, and which is fantastic, right? To get that recent in time, all the way back from 200,000 years before Christ. So this is great results from this big Y test. So a couple of things to note here about this is between here and here, this is about 500 years it takes place between this haplogroup mutation and this one. This is in the time of surnames when they were being given out to people. So over here, this is where John is around 1550, and this is what we think is our oldest known ancestor over here in Kent. But actually, the DNA suggests that possibly we were over here during the time of surnames, not over here where the three St. Mary's churches are. But we were actually over here during the time of surname creation. So that kind of brings doubt into the theory that our surname originated from the three churches in Kent. And now we have to look over here to see if there's an explanation or an origin for the surname Virgin in this completely different area. So that's one thing that's interesting to note about it. The second thing that's interesting to note is that we have arrived over here in Britain at around 1700 BC. Okay, this is way before the Anglo-Saxons, way before the Normans. This is way back when the British Celtic Britons came to Britain. We were not the first Celtic Britons to come. This haplogroup R-L21, which is an earlier branch off of us when we were in Siberia, this haplogroup branched off of us and beat us by about 700 years to Britain. So they beat us there. We weren't the first Celtic Britons, but the Celtic Britons were many small tribes that came to Britain in about a 700-year period. And we were one of those later groups that made it. And so that's what we would be considered. We even predated the Romans. The only people that came before us were the Neolithic and Mesolithic peoples that came and primarily inhabited this area around Stonehenge. So Stonehenge was under construction for about 3,200 years. The first constructions were just mounds of dirt, circular mounds of dirt by the Mesolithic people. So sorry. And later on, the first Celtic Brits came and actually put these stones up, but that was still hundreds of years before we arrived in Britain. So the last two haplogroup mutations happened around here, Worcester and Westonbirt, and I want to put that in relationship to the Somerset Virgin Home, which is down here in Middle Chinook, and the Stonehenge monument, which is over here. Okay, so you can see, and over here we've got Kent, which is where we think possibly our oldest known ancestors are coming from. Not completely sure now that the DNA results are in. They might have come from the Somerset group over here, but time will tell with more DNA testing if we moved over there and then moved to America, or how are the Kent virgins related to these Somerset virgins. Okay, the last point that I want to bring up is another theory on the origin of the surname Virgin. Okay, so I did some more research in this area where we would have physically been during the time of surname creations. what was going on there? Was there anything notable about virgins? And it turns out there is. There is a church here. It's called St. Arilda Church, and it's located right here on the Severn River here. And this church is dedicated to St. Arilda, who was a martyred virgin. And I guess what happened to her, this woman, she refused to have relations with the Lord of the land. This is during the time of when the Druids would have been the spiritual leaders of the Celts. And so like 400 to 500 during this time frame, way before the Romans and even possibly before Christianity had made it to Britain. In fact, right around 500, St. Patrick was one of the first saints missionaries to come to, he made his way over to Ireland to convert people to Christianity. So right before St. Patrick made his missionary to mission to go to Ireland, we have this virgin martyr, this girl who refused to give up her virginity to the Lord of the land. And as a result, he beheaded her and she became a martyr. And so now at this site, this church is dedicated to her. But this site, you can see it's a Norman era church, but actually, if you look from the sky downward on this church, you can see that actually, I get to the right picture here. That's a depiction of her, St. Arilda. You'll see the familiar circular form of the ground. Here we go. So this hilltop was mounded, and these berms were built in the circular format long before this church was built. It was a holy site, you know, that the Celtic Brits used as some type of religious purpose. And so this history of the site goes all the way back to the Druids and these British Celts. And so that story of the martyred virgin might have actually originated from earlier times. And so this site has been dedicated, and there's where she was murdered, there's a spring, and it said that this spring runs red with her blood, and it's like a red algae that's in the water in the spring there. And on the 20th of July every year, they have a ceremony at this spring to commemorate this Saint Arilda. So anyways, perhaps our ancestors lived near this spring or lived near this site of the martyred virgin. I don't know, but this is another theory that we have now on the origin of our surname virgin. All right, I think that's all for today. Catch you on the next one.